welcome back. This week on the Brain Warriors Way podcast, Tana and I are going to talk about change your brain, heal your mind. So the new PBS special that we just recorded last week. I was so excited to do that,
It was so
and
fun.
I made very few mistakes in
You
recording
did. It was like the best one we've done. You were great.
So it's filmed. It's going to come out nationwide in March. So we'll talk a little bit about some new information from the show. But before we do that, you have some reviews you want to read.
I do. I actually want to say thank you to Charlie Bannon, who took the time. Who does handwritten letters anymore? I got a 5-page personally handwritten letter from Charlie Bannon all the way from Ireland. How cool is that? So he writes this really amazing letter thanking us so much for the podcast because he said therapy didn't help him, but listening to the podcast every day completely changed his life. And coincidentally, or not coincidentally, I'm not exactly sure yet, he's a fellow martial artist. He practices Kempo, and he knows my master, Mr. White, and his master, Eddie Downey, I know. So, like, what a crazy small world it is. And the two things I wanted to point out about that, fill your mind with the right things, which he did. So, like, kudos to you, Charlie, and also your community. So his master, Eddie Downey, is an amazing human being. My master, Mr. White, an amazing human being. Our Kempo communities are just great communities. They do amazing things for people and they live in service. And when you have that community behind you and you're filling your mind with really good things will happen. So thank you for taking the time to write that. That's our payment. We often say that. It's makes us feel so good. So thank you, Charlie.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
It is. Actually, there's a little summary of this. He grew up in a violent and abusive home and was suicidal from age 13. Our podcast was really important in his recovery when he found himself sliding back into depression after suffering from meningitis.
Mm-hmm.
The way we talk about finding purpose in our interviews with people who have found purpose despite life's challenges have really helped him. I'm just so grateful that this has been important to those of you who are listening.
It's so sweet. And I have to tell you, so we went to the John Maxwell. I have to like congratulate my husband. He won the John Maxwell Transformational Leadership Award. And we didn't really sort of realize how big this was going to be. We showed up and there's like 3,500 people there. It was an amazing event, huge. And it was a very special moment. And he was having his rock star moment and he was surrounded by people. And so I was sort of standing off over to the side. And this woman comes over to me and she had immigrated from somewhere in Africa. And she starts talking to me. And I thought oftentimes people will like the overflow. I'll get the overflow is what happens. They'll come talk to me since they can't reach you. And so I thought that's what was happening. And she came over and she was talking to me. And all of a sudden she tells me that she listens to our podcast all the time. And then she starts to tell me my life story. And I'm like, okay, that's a little weird, like literally in detail, my life story. And then she goes into specifics from books I've written, like all of my books, and then way back. And she's like, and I looked at her kind of funny and she said, oh no, I've been following you for much longer than your podcast. And I'm like, okay. And then she starts crying and she says, I pray every day that God will do for me what he did for you. And then I start crying. And I'm like, and she said, if she can do it, I can do it. And I started to bawl. And I thought, you know what? That is the purpose. And so this new book deal that I just recently signed, I've been very resistant about doing it, as you know. For the last couple of years, I've been resisting it. And that moment was one of those moments where I went, okay, it's worth it. If one person walks up to me like that, it's worth it.
You know, so many people feel shame for their life. And they think if only people really knew me, they wouldn't like me.
Spent my life thinking that up until 10 years ago.
And I've actually found that the opposite is true, that when you share your struggles, you become more human because the more perfect you are, the less people can relate to you.
Yeah, you told me that. I just didn't believe you. And then I discovered
But I
you
was
were right.
right.
You were
But I
right.
was right.
Yeah. Pain shared is pain divided. But that woman's tears and her saying, I pray every day that he'll do for me what he did for you was just like so powerful.
Wow.
So I just want to thank you
So
guys.
in this week, besides more reviews, and we'll answer some of your questions, I just want to share some of the ideas from Change Your Brain, Heal Your Mind. And the show is really based on my new book, The End of Mental Illness. But PBS was having trouble with the title. It so amazes me. So many people who've not read it, like they didn't read the script,
Right.
have trouble with the title. But when you understand the content, the title just makes perfect sense.
I think it's a great title.
That we are on the cusp of a new revolution that will change mental health care forever.
But I think what you're really saying is the end of mental illness is really the end of mental illness as we see it, as we treat it.
Right.
Right. And
the
it's
end
a
of
great
mental illness begins with a revolution in brain health.
Right.
And I got the best. I just have to share it with you because I haven't shared it with you. I got the best quote for my book. I already have 20, and the book isn't out until March. But this is from Daria Long, who's a physician, a national T-Bird. Yeah, we had her on the show. She's the author of Mom Hacks, which we talked about. And she said, the world needs this book today more than ever. By reframing the discussion of mental health into one of brain health, Dr. Amen obliterates the concept that mental health issues are someone's fault or that they should just deal with it any differently than they would the flu or a broken arm. Most importantly, Dr. Amen gives everyone not just the permission, but the validation and hope to seek help for a better tomorrow. And
I love that.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
That's like one of the best reviews of any of my books ever. Mental illness affects us all. Either you've personally struggled with
It's
one,
so true,
or you love someone who has. No one escapes. And mental health problems are skyrocketing in our society with the deaths from drugs, alcohol, and suicide at their highest level in recorded history, despite the escalating use of psychiatric medications. Yeah, and I said this in the show, we are on the threshold of a new revolution that will change mental health care forever. Based on the 160,000 scans we've done, what we've discovered is these things aren't mental health issues at all.
You know, when I really got in, when I met you and got into what you do, what we do, the part that amazed me was how often when someone comes in and they're really, really struggling with mental health, like having a mental breakdown, and how often I've heard things like, oh, they had a thyroid condition. Oh, they had Lyme disease. Oh, and it was like a simpler fix than you would think. It wasn't a lifelong psychiatric battle.
Where they had mold exposure.
Well, just
where
the
they had
craziest
a head injury.
thing.
And if you see it through the lens of mental illness, then you'll give them drugs or
I'm a nurse.
Put them on psychotherapy.
That's what I saw.
Give them psychotherapy.
Yeah.
Without ever looking or taking care of the organ you treat. And people just don't get. The brain can have problems like your heart can have problems. Yet most people see a cardiologist have never had a heart attack. They're there to prevent them.
Right.
And I see a day
So smart.
when people will see brain health doctors, maybe not psychiatrists. You know, I'm always looking for another word for what I do because I'm not a traditional psychiatrist. I'm just not. I'm trained as one. I'm board certified in child and adult psychiatry. But I don't practice like my colleagues. So we need a new word. So those of you that are listening, if you give me a better word for what we do, you know, I don't know, a brain warriorist, Brain warriorologist.
That's
If you give us a better word, I will sign Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, or The End
Yeah.
of Mental Illness and send it to you.
I like that challenge.
To end mental illness, we must develop a similar way of thinking where we know your risk factors. That's what they do with heart disease. We know your risk factors and we attack each one of them. So, for example, if teenagers sleep just an hour less than their peers, they have a higher incidence of depression, anxiety, school failure, and suicide. So, we have to make sleep a priority. And of all things, light therapy can help. If you have gut problems, you have a higher incidence of anxiety and depression, brain fog. So you got to get your gut right. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought we were talking about the brain.
Right.
If you have Lyme disease, people can become angry, depressed, even psychotic. So if your mind's not right, somebody should at least be thinking about an infection. And when we come back, I'm going to talk about the whole concept of why the end of mental illness and the dedication of the show to my two nieces who were actually there at the taping. It was very
Your
special.
two nieces?
Our
Our nieces.
our nieces.
He stole my nieces.
Stay with us. And, is there one thing you've learned from this podcast? Please post it on any of your social media channels. And we would love for you to leave a review or a question at brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. And we'll enter you into a drawing for for free copy of Tana's book, The Brain Warriors Way Cookbook, which is just amazing. There is no suffering in getting well.
If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're considering coming to Amen Clinics or trying some of the brain healthy supplements from BrainMD, you can use the code podcast10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com or a 10% discount on all supplements at brainmdhealth.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.